Hello and welcome to Fairytale Friday here on the Spindle side, where we do traditional spinning and traditional crafts, and we mix it with the oral tradition of stories that were passed down through hundreds and thousands of years in different cultures. Mostly we'll be focusing on English fairy tales and German fairy tales, but we will eventually move into some more as we go along, if all goes well and goes according. To get started, we are going to talk a little bit, just a very little bit, about the weather. As you can see, it is summertime here, and I am in New York, in Western New York, near Lake Erie. And here we have beautiful four-season weather, where we have a beautiful summer and we get a lot of snow. So as you can see, it is summertime right now. It's actually the month of July, and I'm sitting in front of our garden gate, which is leaning to one side because it's very old, and the plants that are up and over it have pushed it to one side, which gives it some character, but is also a bit hard to look at if you're somebody who really likes order. So it's one of those beautiful natural things that happens that man can't figure out how to do by himself. So today we're going to be thinking about ants. So the saying that I want to think about today is, if the ant hills are high in July, we're in for a snowy winter. So look around where you are and see over the next few weeks left that we have in July, if the anthills are high, if they are higher than they have been or look to be rather high. And let me know in the comments if we should be looking for a snowy winter in your area or a cold winter if you don't get a lot of snow. Yeah, let's look at that together. Let's go out into the world and see if we can find some high ant hills, or maybe some low ant hills if we want a not snowy winter where we live. For our next segment on Fairytale Friday, we're going to be reading a poem, and today, and maybe for a long time, we're going to be looking at Mother Goose. And if you don't know, Mother Goose is actually its own sort of passed down tradition of nursery rhymes, what we call nursery rhymes, but also playground rhymes or play rhymes that children would exchange among each other. I was blessed to grow up in the 1980s when rhymes were still exchanged, and sometimes we had some that were rather naughty, and because they were naughty, they really got passed around a lot, and we were really excited to pass them around. But we also had a lot of jump rope rhymes. But for right now, we're just going to be looking at one poem every Friday. And today's poem is the Mother Goose poem, The Hobby Horse. So if you don't know, a hobby horse is a stick horse, which you may or may not have seen. But you get a stick, a long one, about this long, and you put something on it to be a head. You can use a sock, so you stuff the sock full of something else, maybe other socks. So you get a long thing like this, and the end of it can be the horse's nose, and then the part you put your leg on has the stick in it, and you can tie a rope around it or a ribbon or something and tie it real tight on there, and then ride the stick like you would ride a horse. And hobby horses are really a lot of fun. I actually went in a parade with a hobby horse one time, which was really fun as a little kid, with a group that I was in. And so here's the poem. It has one word in it, which we may never have heard before. I actually had to look it up because it's quite an old word, and it's the word groat, Groat. And it's actually a coin that was worth it was worth 4 pence when it was being used, which is an English sort of money, pence. So here we go. Here we go with our poem. The Hobby Horse. I had a little hobby horse, and it was dapple gray. Its head was made of pea straw. Its tail was made of hay. I sold it to an old woman for a copper groat, and I'll not sing my song again without another coat. And the poem is from this book, The Real Mother Goose. And now, sorry, I'm getting eaten by mosquitoes out here, which maybe you have in your area and maybe you don't. That is the only downside I can see in the summer is the mosquitoes. I even like the heat. So, I'm going to be reading a story called Rumplestiltskin. And it's not terribly long, but it is interesting. And while I'm reading, or while you are listening, we need to think about the very best ways to listen. And there are 2 ways that most people listen best. They listen with busy hands, or they listen with quiet hands. I listen with busy hands. So I am going to be spinning with wool. I'm going to be spinning wool into yarn, which actually goes along with our story. That's why I chose it, because this is our first Fairytale Friday. And I'm going to be spinning most of the time. And the other way you can listen is with quiet hands. So if doing things with your hands is something that distracts you from your story that you're listening to, then it would be a wonderful idea to grab a light blanket or a cool pillow and to find a really cozy place where you can listen and really concentrate with your quiet hands. So those of you with busy hands, you may want to do something like me with yarn, or you may want to draw, or you may want to build with blocks or with Lego, or maybe play with cars even, as long as you can do whatever you're doing really quietly. And for those of you who are drawing, you might find that it's fun to draw a hobby horse, or what you think Rumpelstiltskin might look like, or just anything in the story that stands out to you at all. So I'm going to begin with our story here in just a minute. And I want to show you first what I'll be doing. So this, with the unspun wool on it, it's called a distaff. It's a very old tool that people have used all the way back to the Egyptians, which is thousands of years ago. And this stick here, this little guy, is called a spindle, and it's what you use to spin the yarn. And this is a whirl, and it helps the spindle go around quickly so that you can get lots of twist in there. Okay, let's get started with our story, shall we? This is Rumpelstiltskin from the Blue Fairy Book. There was once upon a time a poor miller who had a very beautiful daughter. Now it happened one day that he had an audience with the king, and in order to appear a person of some importance, he told him he had a daughter who could spin straw into gold. Now that's a talent worth having, said the king to the miller. If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her to my palace tomorrow, and I'll put her to the test. When the girl was brought to him, he led her into a room full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and spindle, and said, now set to work and spin all night till early dawn, and if by that time you haven't spun the straw into gold, you shall die. Then he closed the door behind him and left her alone inside. So the poor miller's daughter sat down and didn't know what in the world she was to do. She hadn't the least idea of how to spin straw into gold, and became at last so miserable that she began to cry. Suddenly the door opened, and in stepped a tiny little man, and said, Good evening, Miss Miller Maid. Why are you crying so bitterly? Oh, answered the girl, I have to spin straw into gold, and I haven't a notion how it's done." "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" asked the mannequin. My necklace," replied the girl. The little man took the necklace, sat himself down at the wheel, and whir, 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 the wheel went round 3 times, and the bobbin was full. Then he put on another, and whir, 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 the wheel went round 3 times, and the second, too, was full. And so it went on till the morning, when all the straw was spun away and all the bobbins were full of gold. As soon as the sun rose, the king came, and when he perceived the gold, he was astonished and delighted, but his heart only lusted more than ever after the precious metal. He had the miller's daughter put into another room full of straw much bigger than the first, and bade her, if she valued her life, spin it all into gold before the following morning. The girl didn't know what to do and began to cry. Then the door opened as before, and the tiny little man, turning the page, appeared and said, "What'll you give me if I spin the straw into gold for you?" "The ring from my finger," answered the girl. The mannequin took the ring, and whir, round went the spinning wheel again, and when morning broke, he'd spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king was pleased beyond measure at the sights, but his greed for gold was still not satisfied, and he had the miller's daughter brought into a yet bigger room full of straw, and said, "You must spin all this away in the night, but if you succeed this time, you shall become my wife." "She's only a miller's daughter, it's true," he thought, "but I can never find a richer wife if I were to search the whole world over." When the girl was alone, the little man appeared for a 3rd time and said, "What'll you give me if I spin the straw for you once again?" "I've nothing more to give," answered the girl. "Then promise me when you are queen to give me your first child." "Who knows what may happen before that?" thought the miller's daughter, and besides she saw no other way out of it. So she promised the mannequin what he decided, and he set to work once more and spun the straw into gold. When the king came in the morning and found everything as he had desired, he straightway made her his wife, and the miller's daughter became a queen. When a year had passed, a beautiful son was born to her, and she thought no more of the little man till all of a sudden one day he stepped into her room and said, "Now give me what you promised." The queen was in a great state, and offered the little man all the riches in her kingdom if he would only leave her the child. But the mannequin said, "No, a living creature is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world." Then the queen began to cry and sob so bitterly that the little man was sorry for her and said, "I'll give you 3 days to guess my name, and if you find it out in that time, you may keep your child." Then the queen pondered the whole night over all the names she had ever heard, and sent a messenger to scour the land, and to pick up far and near any names she could come across. When the little man arrived on the following day, she began with Casper, Melchior, Belshazzar, and all the other names she knew in a string. But at each one the mannequin called out, "That's not my name." The next day she sent to inquire the names of all the people in the neighborhood, and had a long list of the most uncommon and extraordinary for the little man when he made his appearance. "Is your name perhaps Sheepshanks, Cruikshanks, Spindleshanks?" But he always replied, "That's not my name." On the 3rd day the messenger returned and announced, "I have not been able to find any new names, but as I came upon a high hill round the corner of the wood, where the foxes and hares bid each other good night, I saw a little house, and in front of the house burned a fire, and round the fire sprang the most grotesque little man, hopping on one leg and crying, 'Tomorrow I brew, today I bake, and then the child away I'll take, for little deems my royal dame that Rumplestiltskin is my name.'" You can imagine the queen's delight at hearing the name, And when the little man stepped in shortly afterward and asked, "Now, my lady queen, what's my name?" she asked first. "Is your name Conrad?" "No." "Is your name Harry?" "No." "Is your name perhaps Rumplestiltskin?" "Some demon has told you that! Some demon has told you that!" screamed the little man, and in his rage drove his right foot so far into the ground that it sank in up to his waist. Then, in a passion, he seized the left foot with both hands and tore himself in two. The end. That is the end of our story. And I'm not sure, but I think you might have been able to see our cat Jet walking around. He's a silly guy. So as we end our time today, you can see I got a little further with my spindle, and I would love to hear what you made if you have busy hands when you're listening. And if you have quiet hands, I would love to hear how you got yourself cozy while we were listening. And one thing we do that's really wonderful to do after you hear a really great story or you dream a really fabulous dream is to tell people about it. And when you tell people about it, it helps you remember it and it helps you understand what you listen to. And I would love for you to go find somebody in your life, maybe a parent or a sibling, maybe a friend or a teacher, or even a neighbor, and tell them, "I heard this really crazy story about this little guy. They called him a mannequin." And tell them what stood out to you and what you thought about, or maybe this time today, maybe all that stood out to you was Jet the kitty who walked by, or the poem that we read earlier. And after you've told somebody in real life, I would love to hear some of what you told them in the comments. Or if you don't have anyone to tell, you can tell me all about it in the comments. I would love to hear it. And that ends our time today, and I hope you had a really great time listening to our story. I can only imagine how old that story is. Rumpelstiltskin, something about that story seems so old to me. Hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The little man dancing around a fire. I can only imagine. And thus ends our first Fairytale Friday. I'm hoping to do a little series of these in each season of the year. And yeah, I just hope it'll be a really fun time. So if you enjoyed our time together, please subscribe to this channel, and I will see you next week and have another great fairy tale for you. And yeah, see you later.